Awesome. So, hi guys, welcome again to Out of Band, our cybersecurity podcast. Today we are joined by kind of a living legend, if I may say, or at least that's how he's known in the business. We're joined by Arno Reuser, who is considered one of the authorities on OSINT matters, on all OSINT matters in the Netherlands, but also abroad, with nearly 30 years of experience within the Dutch military intelligence services. So, Arno, welcome.
Wow. Yeah, Jennifer, Faith, thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to work for the next hour with two of such highly regarded specialists.
Thank you.
Let me start by saying you really make me nervous now.
No, nothing but praise, and it's all worth it, and it's all just normal.
Blush.
Yeah, but of course I just gave a really short summary. Could you maybe introduce yourself a bit to the audience that we have?
Arnold, Netherlands. I have worked for the Dutch Defense Intelligence and Security Service for over 25 years. They asked me to come over to work for them in 1990.
Wow.
Because I did something that they were unable to do, which is dive into open source information. I had access to internet in 1990, which didn't exist in the Netherlands. I was one of the very few who had access to the internet. I had access to large commercial databases, LexisNexis, Factiva, Progress Dialog, Bloomberg, the big boys. And I am additionally a librarian. I know the world of information. I know the global information organization. I know how to get information.
Yeah.
So they came visiting me and asked me questions about all kinds of subjects regarding international conflict and relations. And I gave them the correct answers using a combination of commercial online databases, dead common libraries, and something that they had never heard of, which is internet. There was no such thing as Windows 3.1, which didn't exist. It was released in 1991, I believe. There was no such thing as World Wide Web. I used Archie, Waze, Veronica, FTP, you name it, all these little tools on a, remember these little green terminals?
Yes.
These little very screens. Yes. That's how I worked, okay, with a modem. I still have that thing, a 24K modem here.
Yes.
It was 2600 baud. That's Dutch. I don't know how to pronounce that in English, which is about 1 kilobyte download speed or something, which was extremely modern in those days. And from that, it got completely out of hand. They made me chief open source intelligence in 1990. And I was tasked by developing that bureau and develop a system of supporting analysts with good information from open sources so they can write intelligence reports. That's the task I had. Now, they were very impressed about the amount of information I could find, especially the quality of information I could find in open sources, which saves them sending a spy. You don't have to intercept all data. You don't have to send spies all the time or steal data. It's out there in the open. You just need to know where to find it. That's it.
And how to check if it's true or not.
And of course, check the validity and the reliability and the usability, blah, 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 which for me is second nature. I was trained to do that at the Library Academy. I was trained the methods and the techniques to do that. The only thing is that fact checking became popular thanks, I think, due to Donald Trump, who talked about fake media. And since then, everybody started fact checking.
Not everyone, but yes.
Yeah, well, that's all of a sudden in the last 6-7 years, fact checkers became very popular. Yeah. And I think, what's new? I've been doing that all my life. It's what you normally do, isn't it? When you book a restaurant, let's talk about OSINT in real life. When you book a restaurant, you check the reviews, don't you?
Yeah.
See if it's good. So what the beep is new there? Okay. So I gradually built that system up and up and up, and things started to develop. I had access to all these online databases. I tried to interact with the analysts, develop my system, which got completely out of hand. Other Intel services asked me to come over and tell them how I did that. I traveled all over the world because OSINT was completely new. Nobody knew what it was in Europe. There were only 2 other people who did this. A colleague of mine in the United Kingdom, Steve E., and a colleague in Sweden, who developed a very successful company in open source information. And those were the only 2. And for the rest, I had to figure out everything myself by traveling all over the world, going to the United States, because they are 25 years ahead with everything, especially Intel. You can laugh about that, but I'm serious here. I don't make jokes there. And gradually this changed all of a sudden, where other people asked me how to do it. So Intel services, law enforcement, private sector asked me to come over to teach them how to do open source intelligence, to provide answers to questions and not a pile of crap like a very well-known free internet search engine. That still works like I did 50 years ago. Just produce a pile of results and that's about it. Right? No wonder it's so, let's cut that, okay?
It's popular, okay?
2008,
it's popular.
It's a very popular search engine. I use it regularly, but it's not for the real work, okay? It's not a serious piece of research. That's not how you do that. I can show you, by the way, in this briefing how small it is and how insignificant it is. I can prove that to you. But anyway, fantastic company, very popular search engine, but that's about it. It's no match for LexisNexis, no match for Bloomberg, no match for human intelligence. In 2008, this got completely out of hand. Companies asked me, can we not simply pay you for your services? So I asked the Minister of Defense, can I please have a job next to my work for the Intel service? Which took them 6 months for research, because obviously they wanted to know how can we check what you do in your private time and not use data from our service. They were happy with what I had designed for them. So after 6 months of research, I got permission to start Reuser's Information Services, with which I traveled all over the world to share my passion for open source intel, to share a methodology of open source intel, how to find the best possible information that matches a intelligence requirement and make sure that the customer gets good, reliable, validated information just in time, just in place.
Yeah. And that is why we actually have you here, because we're excited to learn that from you. So let's just take a step back. We're talking about open source intelligence. What exactly is open source?
OSINT, if we shorten it, because that's the term that is used most often.
So what exactly is open source intelligence, OSINT?
Open source intelligence is, as designed by me, a methodology. A methodology of meeting the demand side of information with a supply side of information by providing customers with good open source information that meets certain requirements. Let's say quality, reliability, validity, authority. Are we sure that the author of the document is really the author? So they can produce intelligence. OSINT is therefore a production process, a methodology. You can use it to produce intelligence reports. Intelligence reports are designed for decision makers to make decisions, to implement change, all right? Like my grandmaster always said, Robert David Steele, intelligence without proper information is pointless. Information without an intelligence analysis is useless. So OSINT is part of a system. It's not the end process, it's the beginning process. After that, we combine the information from open sources with other sources, like human intelligence, the informers in the field, or signals intelligence, or whatever methods there are, to get a complete picture of what is probably going on. And that is the real challenge in this profession, that you have to take a step back, like Faith just said. You have to take a completely objective position to see what's going on. Which means that it could be that Donald Trump was right. Simple.
In some cases.
Okay, in some cases. But the notion that he was an idiot and therefore he's always an idiot is completely wrong. That's not the Intel way of approaching things.
No.
Which is very, very difficult to do. But the war in the Ukraine, have a look at that war from the Russian side. And try to look at it from a viewpoint from Moscow, to see how is it possible that they see NATO as a threat. Which completely revolves things and turns things around, because we are used to having an opinion already, a very biased opinion, and try to find the evidence to prove my cognitive bias.
I mean, it is human nature to look at things through a colored glass, through a colored set of glasses, and to use always your own personal perspective and your own personal experiences.
Of course, I make the same mistake.
Yeah.
I say make the same mistake.
Yeah.
I have a lovely neighbor here. I'm making up this story a little bit. An elderly lady who saw two boys from Morocco, a minority in this country with a bad reputation, on the parking place working on their moped, bromfiets. Is that moped in English?
I think it is, yeah.
Little motorcycles, 50cc, etc. So she calls the police because it's stolen. And besides, they're colored and therefore wrong. Period. So the police comes. Turns out these are two children who live here in the neighborhood. They have it's their moped. They wanted to do some maintenance on the thing, but they didn't want to do that on the street in front of their house, as not to disturb the neighbors. So they moved to the parking place so they wouldn't disturb anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
It was suspicious.
Yeah, it's always the case. I mean, you go to the pub tonight and defend Donald Trump. You'll give up after 10 minutes. Okay.
You will get into arguments and you will get into highly staked emotions. Yeah. Yeah,
and that's the fun part of this profession, that you have to look at it from different sides. So, analysis of competing hypotheses, analysis of competing hypotheses, is one of the better intelligence analysis methodologies, whatever you think of it, where they really try to make a balance between pro and con. To assign weights to arguments, and after that, I'm going to stop explaining it because I don't understand it myself.
So I have a question, because you brought up a very important factor in intelligence, which is basically bias, right? Fighting with bias. How do you, as an OSINT expert, eliminate bias? Because you do have opinions, right? I do have opinions. How do I ensure that my analysis is non-biased?
You can't. Simple as that. What you do is you try to study a lot. You try to hang out with people with an opposite opinion. Our prime minister has once said that as a student, he always hang out with somebody who's completely opposite of him. He always had discussions with this particular friend. He was a very good friend, but they never, ever agreed on anything. And that's how you learn.
Must be good, but also extremely tiring.
Yeah, it is. But I must admit, I myself am conservative, and I like to hang out with activists. Okay. Just to learn another approach, another viewpoint. It's I don't agree, but it's interesting for me. I'm not religious, but I like to hang out sometimes with a very strict religious political party, just to get a different viewpoint and learn from that and see how much more there is. It's really funny.
So basically, in summary, it is just keeping an open mind and making sure that you are able to, if not accept, but at least hear all different perspectives.
It is the most difficult thing to do. The most difficult thing to do, especially because your customer doesn't want that.
No,
your customer
wants a straight answer.
No, they already have the answer. They simply want the evidence to support their answer. Okay. I always give this example of the second Gulf War, 2002, was it? But anyway, where a international allied force invaded Kuwait and Iraq. And the United States wanted a reason to invade Iraq. So they made up that Iraq was actually involved in terrorism. So they need evidence for that. Don't you dare come with documents that prove the contrary, because that's not what they want to read. So they will not say that they disagree. They will simply say, well, bad report, do it again, CIA. Until the CIA writes what you want to read, which is a very common thing to do, This happens so often. It has happened to intelligence services in the United States, where intelligence officers were ordered by Trump to rewrite their reports because he did not want to blame Russia. Russia was a friend. It cannot be that there's a threat from Russia. Threats come from Mexico or whatever, not from Russia. Get it out. It doesn't comply with my preconceived ideas. It happened in France many, many years ago when a terrorist rode on a boulevard in Nice in a very large lorry, killing, I believe, 80 people there. And the policewoman behind a security camera wrote in her report, I have the documents somewhere on my system, she wrote, I have not seen a single policeman on that boulevard in uniform. There were policemen there, but in private. Yeah. She got a phone call, according to the newspapers, from the minister to change that. Regardless of what she saw, she got an order from the minister to change that intel report. Okay, so and that's the most difficult thing there is. Final example, we have here this Dutch director of a very large electronic firm. The man is in his 80s, far in his 80s. He does still do all kinds of inventions. Unfortunately, the inventions are crap. Well, not good enough, but he's such a kind man. What do you do?
Can't really do anything about it. He's still,
Okay.
he's still.
You spare the words.
Yeah, well, it happens, and that's the most difficult thing there is. The most difficult thing there is.
But you give all these examples now, and I can imagine that if there is a person in power who does give a certain order, that there are indeed moments that those kind of reports do get rewritten or somewhat adjusted. But I can imagine, and I hope that you confirm this, that there are also bodies of authority or positions, functions in those kind of institutes that are responsible for at least maintaining some part of the relevancy and the accuracy of those reports.
Yes, there are, and I'm not going to comment any further on that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I don't have any open source evidence for that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No worries. It was just a thought that all of a sudden came out, because I was like, yeah, but we don't want all the reports rewritten, right?
No, but you can imagine that these things happen. These things happen. Simple. And it happens all the time. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Fair enough. No worries.
Let's bring it back to cybersecurity then. What is the value of open source intelligence to cybersecurity, or what is its place in cybersecurity?
Well, it depends a little bit. If I can start with the childish answer, what exactly cybersecurity is, which is rather annoying to me, because the term OSINT is being increasingly misused or abused on the internet for about anything that is sexy or exciting or is a tool or something. And I find the most ridiculous articles on LinkedIn and Facebook by so-called cybersecurity experts who tell me what exactly the definition of OSINT is, or give training on OSINT, and then I get an invitation to join a Facebook OSINT hacking course. And I think, a Facebook OSINT hacking? Yeah. What the beep is that? It's got nothing to do with it. I have definitions here. Maybe you'd like me to show you a few of the. Can I do that? Show you a couple of definitions?
Yes, please. We're very curious about them.
That I collect, and I have even more examples in screen dumps on my phone that I'm going to put into a lesson. But some of these examples are really funny. Let me share my screen there. Click share. And if all's well, you have the wrong screen. There we go.
Oh.
Do you now see my browser?
We see a desktop with a green background and Reuser's information services, open source intelligence.
Okay. Something like this?
Yeah. Now we see your browser.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So here is the definition of OSINT, like I just explained. Open source intel is a collaborative integrated methodology and production process, blah, 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 blah. I've explained that yet. I've said something here about the legal aspects, about the ethical aspects, because as you will understand, if I really start searching, I can find out the most amazing things about faith that she doesn't want me to find. Okay, give me a couple of weeks and I'll get the girl. With all due respect, by the way. Here is a couple of other definitions I found. Here's number 3. As such, OSINT is actually a reconnaissance process. No, it's not. And to determine entry points into the organization. What kind of crap is that? It's got nothing to do with it.
It's
I think I can use OSINT in any stage, not necessarily recon.
Yeah, no, it's a very narrow use case basically for OSINT. Yeah. But it's not the definition of it.
It refers to publicly available information that may come from media such as newspapers. Then it becomes interesting. While about 20 years ago, the lack of available information The lack of available information 20 years ago. Have you ever seen a library on the inside? What are you doing?
I think that perhaps the people that are creating these definitions were not the people that sat in the library when they were younger.
I have been in the holy grail of librarians, which is the catacombs of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. They collect everything that's printed all over the world. It doesn't matter, okay? So if somebody says 20 years ago, the lack of available information, they're clearly not librarians. They have no idea about the amount of information that is available. Open source intelligence gathering, which is typical for amateurs. Typical for amateurs, you don't gather intelligence, you create intelligence. You gather information. If I can gather intelligence, what the beep is the function of an intelligence service?
Oh, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Not now. I'd really love to talk about that later.
So here, this is the funniest one. Big data from the deep web is OSINT.
No.
Whatever you call it, online big data, OSINT, or open source Intel, it doesn't matter according to Bright Planet, it's all the same thing.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Isn't that funny? Anyway, I couldn't resist showing you this. The value is therefore for about everybody. It can be used in cyber security, cyber intelligence to find out what the threat is to, let's say, a company or an individual. I have trained individual security companies who have to protect, physically protect important people. And they want to know what are the threats there? How do their children travel to school? What people live in their neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. In companies, as you know, 90% of the threat is not a cyber threat at all. Many people think that cyber threats come from doing some IP spoofing or MAC address hacking or God knows what, or use all these fancy tools. Just do some dumpster diving and you'll find a heck of a lot of information about companies. Try to be kind to the cleaning ladies, to the doormen, etc., etc. It's all social engineering. And that's all open source information. So you use open source information to get the sides and the corners of a jigsaw puzzle. You know, jigsaw puzzle?
It's the,
yeah, precisely. Yeah. And you work your way in until you can't go any further. Then you use cyber to check IP addresses, domain names, domain name histories, etc., etc. Then you're going to use cyber tools to see how much do people leak.
But I do agree what Arno says, that we tend to look at information and think that that is intelligence, but in the sense, there's no intelligence being created if you don't have an analyst actually analyzing that information.
See, so I know this a good friend of mine who is a intelligence worker for a private company, a very large company, a dairy company, explained to me how he found out what the production capability was of the competition. What he did was he used Google Maps satellite view to have a look at a picture of their production plant. And then he saw the length of the shadows of their little storage towers. And based on the date of the picture and the length of the shadow, you could calculate how high these towers are. And therefore, what probably their production capability is. Okay, open source data. Just use your brain.
But it's unconventional thinking, because who thinks about looking at shadows to determine time and location information?
People always make mistakes, I want to show you a lovely example from 2 weeks ago, I believe, and I'm going to share my screen again. And hopefully this time I know how to do it. There we are. Can I share my screen again?
Yeah,
yes, please.
The show is
there we go. And what you'll see is, again, my browser, blue screen.
Yes.
Excellent. This has happened. This is what happened 2 weeks ago. Mr. Sergei Sreda is a Russian photographer, a military reporter. He visits this Wagner Group headquarters in the Donbass, Ukraine. And he makes a picture of these people. All right. And he publishes this picture on social media. What the heck do we see here?
Oh, Bоже mой.
Oh, there is the street sign with the name of the street and the number of the house.
Yeah.
Location information.
All right. So this house was bombed after 30 minutes or so. bombed to pieces. 20 people died, I believe.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, that's 17th of August. I got this article 2 weeks ago. It's a wonderful example of leaking. A wonderful example that somebody doesn't check Mr. Schrader for what exactly do you photograph and can we please have your pictures before you start publishing that stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently they don't have a mechanism to do validation of information. And this man is so stupid that he simply publishes that stuff. I'm not sure if he's still alive. Okay.
Sorry.
Wonderful example that things go wrong. What I do with open source data when I want to work together with cyber boys and cyber girls, I'll get the screen back.
Yes.
There we are.
Yep.
What I would do, for instance, we have this company, large company, that does all kinds of wonderful intellectual property inventions. Okay, patent invention, patent-like inventions. I read the annual report to find out which people work there, who works together. I can't do any social engineering with people who work together because they know each other. I'm going to look for people who do not work together. Then I'm going to check these people on LinkedIn and Facebook and other channels to see what do they talk about. Do they ignore certain colleagues or do they gossip about certain colleagues, etc., etc., etc. So I get a little network picture of who likes who. Then I know who I want to target. Then I'm going to ask the cyber boys, can you please hack that account? Can you please go there, go there, go there? I think these two people hate each other. They're competing each other. He also always works from this laptop, from that environment. He lives in that city. I'll do my own whois, my own domain name, blah, 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 blah. So I can hand that over to the cyber expert and say, well, this is probably where he works from. Have fun. I want to have access to his laptop. Or something. I'm making this up completely, by the way.
But it's an interesting use case for it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, because it shows you so wonderful how open source and cyber gets together.
Yeah.
All right. And secondly, as I already said, in cyber, I believe 80%, maybe it's more, I'm not an expert there, is basically people talking too much. Blah, blah, blah. They don't pay attention. Simple. I have a wonderful example, a person, Neil Moore is his name. Have I told you that story? No. Neil Moore, fantastic story. Neil Moore is convicted for fraud in the United Kingdom. He serves time in Wandsworth Prison, which doesn't exist anymore, but he serves time Wandsworth Prison. And he's convicted for fraud, okay? Remember that. Now, convicted for fraud, he was allowed to keep his phone.
Okay.
What he did was, on his phone, he created a website pretending to be the Ministry of Justice, and he created a fraud email that he sent to the director of the prison, pretending to be somebody from the Ministry of Justice, ordering the director of the prison to set him free, which they did.
Sounds like a movie.
And
perfect. Just a perfect situation.
And they only found out after 3 days when his lawyers came visiting him and they found an empty cell and nobody knew where he was.
Well, at least he was smart enough to not communicate it to his lawyers.
And then I think, how can you do that? How can you be so stupid? It is a validation of information is simply a part of the entire process. Here, look, this is actually the intelligence cycle of the production process of open source information. And it says in the second circle, validation phase, which means check where does the mail come from? Who's the sender? Is this real?
But that's the thing. I mean, people, as soon as something looks trustworthy, as soon as it looks real, people are usually not necessarily inclined to actually test it or try it out or to verify it. And that can either because they actually trust it or because they're under a time pressure or something. Usually people are just inclined to believe what is in front of their eyes.
Correct. And that's exactly what Google does, what Facebook does, etc. Is this particular filter bubble where Google and other social media search engines, social media search engines will return results that match your profile.
Yeah.
Which means you end up in a filter-like bubble.
Yeah.
I'll give the screen back. which is easier, and you end up in a certain filter bubble where you cannot escape from, which is slightly annoying, very annoying, I may say. So what happens is, share screen. Or did I stop sharing?
You're not sharing anything right now.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So what happens is, if you are searching, let's say, for you're looking for criminal youth gangs, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Criminal youth gangs and Amsterdam. You find Moroccans, you click on them.
Yeah.
Right? And Google remembers that. Now, a week later, you do a search again, and you do criminal youth gangs, Rotterdam.
And you get
What
the same
will Google
research.
return as first? Well, the Moroccans, because I like them so much.
Yeah.
Which gives me the impression that Moroccans are in Rotterdam a problem as well. Then I do criminal youth gangs, New Vennep. And Google thinks, all right, you search for Amsterdam and Rotterdam, you always click on these Moroccan groups. So we'll put the Moroccans on top again. If you have a database of 10 billion results, there's always something about Moroccans in New Vennep. So I'm concluding, wait a minute, that a gang in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, New Vennep, this is an international criminal organization. I have to file a report about this. Google says so themselves. And they're right, it's Google, isn't it?
If you don't use other resources, then indeed it is true. But usually it's good to verify through other resources.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. So that's how you see how you can easily fall for this. This was reported about 10 years ago at a TED conference by somebody who is himself an activist, and his best friend is conservative. And despite the fact that they searched for the same news, they got completely different results.
Yeah.
He got left socialist results and he got conservative results, despite the fact that they searched for the same thing. All right.
Yeah.
This is very helpful from the search engines because they really like to help you. Obviously, when I search for restaurants, I mean restaurants in the city where I live, not someone else. So it can be helpful, but sometimes you have to really take care of that. Take that into account and use other search engines.
Yeah. Maybe. So I think this is a good segue to OSINT in everyday life, because one of the things that you shared is that photo, right? The photo that led to probably some deaths, which we don't know. How can I, as an everyday user, if I'm not in IT, how can I make sure that I'm not oversharing? Because I know one radical way of addressing that is just not to share any information online, but we live in a world whereby everything is online.
Social media is prevalent, yeah.
Yeah, so how do we ensure that whatever we're sharing is not oversharing? And point in case is just a photograph.
Well, first of all, please stop sharing pictures of juveniles, babies, and little children. They didn't ask for that, and it will be used against them. They will end up, part of them, in a pornographic website. And abuse for child pornography. That's the first thing you do. Secondly, my rule is this. If you realize that your mail is readable for anybody in 10 years from now, all over the world, and you can't delete it, are you still sure you want to write what you're writing right now?
Which is
these are the 3 rules. And I break them all the time. I break them all the time. Only 2 months ago, I wrote an email on the discussion group that I really regret because I was furious about something. And when you're angry, when you're emotional, do not mail, period.
No, just wait, calm down, and then sit again behind the computer.
Because you can't withdraw it. Once published, always published. Now, I found this when I was working with Trumpet Windsock, which you don't know, but it's a very simple tool to turn your Windows 3.1 machine, which you have never heard of either, on the internet. And I'm still unsure how it worked, but I got it running, but I didn't understand how it worked. So I asked in this discussion group a question about how to run Trumpet Windsock using this particular 2400 baud modem, etc. And only later I saw what a stupid question that is. That's really a question of somebody who has not read the manual or whatever. And I found that mail for years and years and years to come. To realize maybe you want to draw back a little bit. Are you sure you want to publish this?
Yeah.
Remembering the 3 rules, it will be probably retrievable in 10 years from now, all over the world.
Which is a very interesting statement. And I think that it's also good to be aware of it. But at the same time, it's also one of the most difficult ones because especially in the social media times nowadays, instant gratification and the mental brain pleasure that you receive from, for example, likes or, for example, other types of responses from people, it allows people or prevents people basically from actively, consciously thinking about posting things.
Yeah, that's for me as a librarian and information professional the most annoying thing because people post on an emotional basis,
yeah,
flooding the internet with nonsense information which has no value for me at all. If only for that, I would love people to have a little delay in publishing. My bank here in the Netherlands, if you want to increase the amount of money you want to pay per day, the amount of money that you want to transfer or take from an ATM or so per day is limited by me to €200 per day, no more.
Yeah.
If I want to increase that because I have to buy something expensive, I have to wait 4 hours until that becomes active. Because the bank says if a criminal calls you up, a cyber criminal calls you up and asks you, can you please now transfer 2,000 because your bank account is being attacked by cyber blah, 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 please increase the amount. You're not going to wait 4 hours.
Yeah.
No.
Which is a handy trick.
Yeah.
Annoying for me because I have to wait 4 hours.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Maybe also being a bit conscious of the time. So how does one actually get started in OSINT? Because you, Arno, are a librarian by trade. You started as a librarian, but a lot of people don't even realize that that's still a profession, unfortunately, nowadays. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who is, for example, our age or a little bit younger and wants to get started in information gathering and analysis?
1, OSINT is not cyber. It's got nothing to do with each other, okay?
Yeah.
Well, it's got to do something with each other because OSINT is the preparation phase for cyber defense, for cyber attack.
Yeah.
Secondly, you go to a library academy and you study the world of information. I'm a librarian, but I've never worked for the public library, ever. I was trained to be a intermediary between the supply side of information and the demand side of information, solving information problems for large companies. We want to put this new product in the market. How's the market going to respond?
Yeah.
The prime minister of orange country is going to blue country. What's he going to do? How do we respond to that, etc. Okay. I can imagine that you don't have time to go to a library academy to learn the world of global information. Talk to a librarian, ask for a private tour through a scientific library and see how you can use that to find facts, names, numbers, and how to find validated facts, names, and numbers.
Yeah.
Secondly, do your reading. I've made a bibliography of important open source intelligence reports, mainly from the United States, explaining how do you set up the system?
Yeah.
How do you develop a open source open source intelligence production capability? How do you organize that? What is it? What do you need for that? What are the demands for the requirements for the personnel, etc. Thirdly, learn to program. This may sound funny, but the first computer I ever had, promise me you won't laugh.
No.
Faith?
I'll try not to.
Good. Was a Commodore 64. And the second thing I did was learn how to program. How does that thing work? My second computer was an 8086 XT machine. XT stands for extended technology. It was hyper modern in those days. 16-bit processor. Super modern, yeah, precisely. 16-bit machine. And I learned how to program that thing. How to get the most out of it. I studied what happens actually when I browse to another page. What happens if I receive a mail but it goes back? How can I change that? What's it for? So I had little books describing the organization of memory on registers, on bits and bytes. I learned how to calculate octogonal. No, that sounds like something very dirty. I learned other calculation methods to calculate in hexadecimal to address memory directly. So I can change things. So I've learned so much from that. And learning how to program, writing my own scripts to download large amounts from the internet, to strip complete websites, extract the information I want to use, create that into a report so I can do analysis. All right. So these were the 3 things I would advise to do. Sit back, relax, study, read, learn from a librarian, do your reading, do some technical stuff, because that's something that you cannot miss. I find it unacceptable that somebody doesn't know how to do whois, how to do a domain research, to look at the URL. It's so simple, but for people it's too difficult to do. Even worse, with Microsoft Edge, the URL box is this small because they simply assume that nobody looks there. It's your first line of defense. And then you do some course on journalism, perhaps, to learn how to read critically. Now, I do a course on reading critically, and I collect examples of nonsense text, which says absolutely nothing. And to give you one example, I once wrote back to a back then girlfriend who was concerned about my habit of drinking beer and eating red meat. When I was in London, I wrote back to her and I said, darling, I can promise you, I haven't had a single beer and I've eaten vegetarian only. Now read between the lines, read between the lines. I haven't had a single beer and I've eaten vegetarian only. What exactly does the word beer mean?
It's a specific liquor. So it means that either you had more than one beer, more than one single beer, or you had something else completely as a liquor to drink.
There's five kinds. Real ale, stouts, bitter, lager. I forgot number 5. Beer, which is the black stuff. Lager is the stuff that we drink for beer. I had real ales, which is not beer. 5 every evening. Now, which English dish is absolutely no meat and absolutely very, very popular in England?
Fish and
chips.
Fish and chips. Twice a day. So here's a wonderful example of reading between the lines and try to figure out what exactly does it say. We have a price reduction in our holiday package up to 30%. How much reduction do you get?
Usually not 30%.
Well, nothing, because it says up to. Okay.
Marketing though.
I have so many examples of this. A very famous example from real life is an intelligence report written to the President of the United States of America in the 1950s. And the intelligence community says there, we assess that the threat that Russia will invade Yugoslavia should be considered a serious possibility. Should be considered a serious possibility. That's what it says in the report, if I remember correctly. I've got it somewhere on my system. Should be considered a serious possibility that Russia, the Soviet Union, is going to invade Yugoslavia. Should be considered a serious possibility.
Is that 70%?
What do you expect the President of the United States to do? Okay, so Sherman Kent was present at that briefing in the White House, and later he asked his briefer, what the heck did you actually mean? Nobody knew. And Sherman Kent then started to develop all these analysis intelligence methodologies and theories to make it more precise. Should be considered a serious possibility. Do you really need an intelligence community to conclude that?
It's a very consultative answer, though. It's trying to say something without being too harsh.
You're basically not.
It's always true. It's always true.
Yeah.
And complete nonsense. I can't do anything with it. So again, in this little drawing I have, data, information, intelligence, decisions, change. That's the order of things. You find data, turn that into information, you analyze to produce intelligence, which should influence decisions, which should lead to change. If it doesn't, the latter two is pointless. Forget it.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Which does carry some weight.
Yeah, well, I hope. Otherwise, it's completely pointless. Some people disagree completely. They say, well, we have to be general, otherwise we make mistakes. Yes, but look, I mean, I have a military unit, they go into action in Quadronia. And all I tell them, and I'm not making this up,
Yeah.
is that the enemy has between 50 and 250 tanks.
Mhm.
Between 50 and 250 tanks,
You
full
cannot
stop,
prepare
end of
for that.
paragraph, end of chapter.
You cannot properly prepare for that.
So what do you want me to do as a military commander? Can you
Mhm.
please explain what tank?
Yeah.
There's a little difference between AMX 13 and an Abrams M1A2. Can you please explain how well is the crew trained to use that tank? Can you please explain, is the crew willing to fight and risk their lives? Because the tank is a primary target, which is the issue now in the Ukraine, of course. Are you sure these Russians want to fight against their own countrymen?
Mhm.
Is the tank in operable condition, or is it broken?
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
it means absolutely nothing. It's
Yeah.
completely pointless. East Germany has 10 tank divisions. West Germany has 10 tank divisions. I don't know what a tank division is. How many tanks? How many personnel? How well are they trained? How's the morale? Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Makes sense?
It needs to be more specific.
Oh, very much more. Otherwise, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So just to wrap up, my final question will be with regards to OSINT hygiene for an everyday user. Are there any tips in that particular scenario other than the 3 that you mentioned earlier?
I'm not sure I am totally comfortable with OSINT in daily life.
Okay.
Because you use it all the time. If open source intel is a method of collecting information, analyzing and drawing conclusions, it's what I do when I go to a supermarket,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Read the advertisements, see what can I use, is this good for me, yes or no, take a decision, buy or don't buy. I'm going to the beach and I'm passing a little building, there's a bag standing there against the front door. There's nobody around. So what do?
Yep.
I collect information. I'm unsure as to the purpose of that bag. Is there a bomb in it? I don't know.
Yeah. So basically what you say is that, OSINT has always been there and is always there, right? It's not new. It's just putting a new terminology on something that has always existed, basically.
Absolutely. At the conference in Vienna, 1814, 1815, where Europe under Metternich decided on the future of Europe when Napoleon and the French were defeated, finally defeated. The French provided the dinner. This is a real story. It's the last story, right? I won't hold you up any longer.
No.
The French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Monsieur Talleyrand, provided dinner, which everybody accepted because the French know how to cook. They know a hell of a lot of good food. So Talleyrand had a 36 course dinner prepared for all the congressmen, and he made sure there were waiters, etc., etc. So all the diplomats had a fantastic time. What they didn't know was that all these waiters were ordered to listen very carefully when they served the food and clean the table and report back to Talleyrand what they heard. Isn't that a wonderful example of human intelligence and also open source intelligence?
Distract them with proper food and then just listen to what they say.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Isn't that amazing?
And I bet it still works nowadays.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just be friendly to the cleaning ladies. Be friendly to a doorman. Be friendly to the taxi drivers. They know so much. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. I used to, when I lived in my house here for just a week, I was out shopping and my brother came visiting me. This is really true. Okay, I'm not making this up. My brother came visiting me. It was in front of the door. He rang the bell, but I didn't open up because I was out shopping. And my brother told me later that 3 houses down the block, an elderly lady stepped out the house and put her hands to her mouth and yelled to my brother, "He's gone shopping." And my brother is stunned. And he told me, "She only lived there for a week. How does she know?" Is that a kind of Stasi informant or something? And that's not only a wonderful example of getting open source information, there's also a wonderful example of leaking information without being aware of that. It's really amazing. I once made a lovely graph, a mind map graph, of how much information you leave behind in daily life. I stopped after 2 days. It's too
I
much.
don't. I don't even think I want to know how
I
much.
don't want to know.
Like, no.
No,
I
you
don't
don't. You don't.
So, okay, last question. Over the 30 years plus that you've been doing this open source intelligence, what are some of your highlights, if shareable?
Yeah, I think where people actually apply the lessons and change the organization to do it. Okay, when people come back.
Okay.
I was once invited by a police organization after a year. Arno, we've changed our complete organization. Would you mind coming over a day to judge? Have we done well?
Cool.
That's what I like.
That's
That's
really,
what I really like.
Yeah.
because
What I
that
like
actually, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I guess that's indeed one of the better situations, because it actually makes you feel like your knowledge, your expertise, your input and your efforts are being appreciated, and something good actually comes out of it that can contribute to society.
Yeah.
Correct.
You see
Sometimes
the impact.
I beg your pardon?
You see the impact.
Yeah.
Correct. Sometimes I get mail from former students, customers, who mail me, Arno, I have applied your method,
Mhm.
and believe it or not, I finally found what I was looking for. Only because they used my methodology, which is for me amazing. I love these examples.
Nice.
I can share the examples with you, but I'm not going to share obviously the subject or the names. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But that's what I learned. That's what the feedback I get back sometimes, and it's really amazing. Sometimes they can't give me feedback because the organization is too sensitive, obviously.
Obviously.
And I'm very sensitive about that as well.
Which is
Because you will understand if a large computer firm calls me up and, please, Arno, can you teach us OSINT? The entire world learns that I'm going to teach them how to use Google.
Yeah.
That's maybe not good for their reputation.
Yeah.
All right. It's like my house doctor said, he had once a patient on his practice who died. And then a car shows up to remove the body in front of his practice, which is not good for his career. See?
No,
Sorry.
it's not the reputation that you want to exert.
No. So there's some discussion there involved, but anyway. It's a wonderful profession. I love to do it. I'm passionate about it, especially helping people, not selling my product, but actually trying to convince them to change the system, to produce something that is useful, that is actionable, that they can apply and use for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And if our viewers would like to learn this methodology from you, the OSINT methodology from you, how can they find you?
Yeah, that's not exceptionally difficult. I understand I'm not very difficult to recognize out there on the street. They can mail me.
Yeah.
They can look me up on my website. They can WhatsApp me. They can LinkedIn me, anything they like.
Yeah.
To contact me for the initial contact. You know the privacy rules of LinkedIn. Anything that's on LinkedIn belongs to LinkedIn.
Yep. Yep.
So somewhere after mail number 3, I'm going to ask to change the channel that we use for communication.
Which makes sense.
Absolutely. I've read what Google does with your data. I've read what Twitter does with your data. I'm happy with that. I like Twitter. I'm happy with Google, so they can do with my data whatever they like. I've done everything wrong on privacy from 1990 onwards that you can imagine, so forget it. But it's still something that you have to take care of.
Of course.
So please contact me and I'll make a plan for you, and hopefully we can figure something out. The plans are always completely dedicated to the customers. I want to know who you are. I want to know what your problem is. I want to know what you're hoping to learn. And then I create a dedicated program for you.
Okay. And do you also have like do you only do the custom ones, or do you have like a normal couple of days type of training, like the one that Jennifer attended?
Yeah, that's the open subscription training program. That's the open source intelligence Pathfinder range. It's a 3-day training program, which is quite intense for anybody who wants to subscribe.
Okay.
And it's 3 days in The Hague. It's from Tuesday to Thursday. It's hard work. I know there's many OSINT courses out there, and some people already have done an OSINT course, but then from disappointments come to me because all they learn is tricks and tools, and that's it.
And
they can't answer any.
Just saying from an experience base, I really, really appreciated the training. It was very in depth, well prepared, and also a lot of hands-on experience that you gain in there.
You make me blush again, Jennifer.
Which is good.
And that's what I want to achieve. Okay, I'm not there to earn a contract or to earn money. I really want to share what I know. I've always learned there is 3 stages in any career: 1 to learn, 2 to execute, 3 share.
Yeah.
And when they call me back and tell me, Arno, this is what we did, is that in line with what you try to teach us? I'm so happy with that. It's amazing, amazing. I'll do anything for you.
Fair enough.
And with that, Jennifer, would you like to wrap up?
Yeah. Arno, thank you so much for joining us today. I think Faith and I both had a really, really interesting conversation, and we both enjoyed it. I hope that you did it as well. Yeah, so let's keep it at that. I would say thank you all for watching, and if you want to have if you have ideas for new topics, if you want to see someone here as well, or if you want to join yourself, please reach out to us, and yeah, see you guys at the next episode.
Faith, Jennifer, thank you very much for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Good.
And if you've enjoyed this session half I did, you had a wonderful time as well, I hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
See you
joining
soon.
us.
Thank you, Arno. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.